Okay, this is part 3 of the beta amyloid story about why beta amyloid can cause brain damage and what you can do to avoid it. And it's pretty easy to avoid it once you understand what's going on. Okay, well, first of all, we got to talk about this paper right here called The Pathobiology of Diabetes Complications, a Unifying Mechanism by Michael Brownlee. He won the award, the 2004 award, as the best diabetes researcher in the whole world. He gave the Banting Lecture. And this is a magnificent paper. It's like the Sistine Chapel of diabetes research paper. It's one of the greatest research papers I ever read in my whole life. It's magnificent and beautiful. I cried when I read it. It was so beautiful. He's a guy who had type 1 diabetes and thought he was going to die, so he devoted his life to researching diabetes. This is him. This is Michael Brownlee. Okay, this guy is a real bona fide genius of the geniuses. Okay, he figured out the mechanism of diabetes, and man, when you read this paper, he would sort of say, you're probably asking this question. Well, we answered that question. Then you're probably going to ask this question. We answered that question. And you're probably going to ask this question. We answered that question. The bottom line was fat, especially sat fat, inhibits the inner mitochondrial membrane electron transport. And when it blocks electron transport, then the electrons start going backward and they start dropping into the matrix. When you drop an electron into the matrix, it'll combine with oxygen to make a superoxide. That'll get neutralized by superoxide dismutase, SOD. Okay, but the bottom line is you don't want a lot of fat going into your skeletal muscle cells. Okay, that's the important point. The number one cause of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is excessive dietary fat, especially saturated fat. That's an important thing to know. Hardly anybody knows that. Your average doctor doesn't know that. I'd say about 98% of doctors don't know that, or 99%. Okay, normally what insulin does is it binds the insulin receptor on a cell, like a skeletal muscle cell is where most of your glucose should go after eating a meal. And once the insulin binds to the insulin receptor, it causes the glucose type 4 transporters in a cytoplasmic vesicle to have that vesicle diffuse over to the plasma membrane, merge with it, and the glucose type 4 transporters, then allow the glucose to come into the cell. And that's how glucose gets into the skeletal muscle cell. That's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. The cell can burn it or it can store it as glycogen. Okay, here's normal electron transport. The electrons are passed down from carrier to carrier, and then simultaneously what really happens is the hydrogen nucleus is split into an electron and a proton. The protons are pumped into the intramembranous space to build up a gradient like pressurized air, and then that gradient is harvested by allowing a proton to re-enter the matrix. And when it re-enters the matrix right here, it'll spin the ATP synthase. This is ATP synthase, also called complex 5, and a phosphate will be added to adenosine diphosphate, as in having two phosphates to become adenosine triphosphate, ATP. ATP is like the energy currency of the cell, like a $20 bill. Okay, that's how energy is made. All right, so the important point is the sat fat's going to mess this all up. Excessive amount of sat fat is going to overwhelm the electron transport chains in this region here around coenzyme Q, complex 3, and you're going to drop electrons back down into the matrix. Not good. If you do this a little bit, it's normal, but too much of this is going to cause oxidative stress, and that can damage the mitochondria itself. But the bottom line is when there's excess fat getting into this mitochondrial matrix, it's called overnutrition, and the mitochondria sends a signal out to the cytoplasm. We've got overnutrition. You need to shut down the uptake of glucose. So what happens is the overnutrition signal is sent by the mitochondria into the cytoplasm, and it's going to block the movement of these glucose type 4 transporters to the plasma membrane. And because the glucose type 4 transporters can't go to the plasma membrane of the skeletal muscle, the glucose can't get into the cell. So that's insulin resistance. So insulin resistance means glucose type 4 transporters can't get up to the plasma membrane. And because they can't get up, the glucose stays in the blood, so you're going to get high blood glucose after eating. Eating is called prandial, so you're going to have postprandial hyperglycemia, postprandial high blood glucose in the blood. Okay, so this is why you don't want to eat a high-fat diet, because you're giving yourself type 2 diabetes. And Nathan Pritikin used to joke that all Americans have diabetes after dinner because most people ate high-fat dinner, meaning a lot of meat. Okay, that's typical in the U.S. of A. All right, and then why is it such a big deal? Because you can't block the transporters for fat. The fatty acids will just move up to the plasma membrane of the skeletal muscle. They'll intercalate into the outer leaflet of the plasma membrane, and then they'll flip-flop into the inner leaflet. and then they'll just move into the cytoplasm, then go into the mitochondria. So you can't avoid it. All you can do is eat less fat. The more fat you eat, the more fat you'll have in your blood, the more fat will get into your skeletal muscle, and the more it'll go into your mitochondria, your skeletal muscle, and cause overnutrition effect and prevent the insulin from functioning correctly, give you insulin resistance. And when you get insulin resistance, now, because the blood glucose remains high, that's going to activate the pancreas to release more insulin. So your blood insulin levels are going to go up. It's called hyperinsulinemia. So you're going to get, your pancreas is going to keep cranking out that insulin, and so you get hyperinsulinemia. Well, now you have another chemical in your blood, an enzyme called insulin-degrading enzyme, and its job is to remove the insulin from the blood. It has relatively high affinity for insulin. But guess what? That same chemical, insulin-degrading enzyme, also has a secondary job to remove the beta amyloid. If it's tied up, and it's only made in fixed amounts, if it's tied up and it can't remove the insulin, and it's too busy removing the insulin, then it's not available to remove the beta amyloid. So the circulating beta amyloid that's in your periphery, meaning outside your brain, will then go across the blood-brain barrier, go into your brain. So you get elevated brain levels of beta amyloid protein. So you get it? When you routinely eat high-fat meals, you're screwing yourself because you're going to increase intracranial beta amyloid, and that over time can cause significant brain damage. Okay? But why did this all happen? Because you're eating high-fat diets, especially saturated fat in this case. Okay, here's just some papers along these lines. Short-chain fatty acids prevent depressive symptoms that you would otherwise get when feeding, let's say, high fructose corn syrup, which gets made into fatty liver. Okay, so the fiber protects the blood-brain barrier. And the reason is the short-chain fatty acids made in the gut, they're also travel through the blood, go to the brain. They're used to make blood-brain barrier. Okay, so they protect your blood-brain barrier. That's what you want. Okay, it's been repeatedly shown you feed high-fat meals to rats and they get a drop in their cognitive function. Same with humans, okay? High-fat diets cause increased blood-brain barrier permeability, and they cause increased leaky gut. They disrupt neuron ion gradients. They allow toxins into the brain parenchyma. This causes brain fog. So eating a high-fat diet is a way you can lower your IQ. Okay, here's another paper. Hippocampal function is impaired by high-fat diet in mice, increases blood-brain barrier permeability. High-fat diet, 60% of mice, 60% fat in mice, their memory drops. Okay, mitochondrial function drops. It's not good. You get increased blood-brain barrier permeability. It's all bad. And they often feel kind of a little bummed out. Yeah, well, you feel bummed out when your brain's not working well. It's like sickness behavior. So you can make yourself more depressed. Well, guess what? You can decrease your depression by eating a low-fat vegan diet. Rapid reversal and impairment of episodic memory by high-fat diet in mice. So when they fed a high-fat diet, 60% fat, they'll have decreased memory. Low-fat diet, they do better. So the high-fat diet caused a drop in memory within just one day. In mice, episodic memory together with spatial and contextual associated memory is compromised, decreased after only 1 day of a high-fat diet. These problems, these memory deficits are rapidly reversed by switching mice from a high-fat diet to a low-fat diet. So we talked about how animal protein increases your risk of cancer, and T. Colin Campbell could turn the cancer on and off by adding animal protein. Well, gee, look at this. You drop brain function by eating high-fat diets, and you could reverse it in 1 day just by eating a low-fat diet. Okay? So that's why I eat a low-fat vegan diet, because I want to be healthy. All right, here's some other interesting information. Biologic effects of pulse and continuous electromagnetic fields and the mechanism of effect by Alan Frey. And here's another one. Radio frequency fields, they increase blood-brain barrier permeability. So what does this mean? It means use a speakerphone on your cell phone. Don't hold it right next to your head. It's a low-power microwave transmitter that opens up your blood-brain barrier, meaning that it'll increase the permeability of your blood-brain barrier, meaning that it'll allow bacterial endotoxins in your blood to get access to your brain. Okay, so you don't want that. So what I'm basically saying is you can lower your cognitive function by holding a cell phone to your head. So you want to use your speakerphone when possible. Okay, here's just more of the same type of paper. Permeability of blood-brain barrier induced by, continuous wave, modulated wave. This one is by Salford. Here's another paper. Same thing. Blood-brain barrier permeability increase after exposure to GSM mobile phones, cell phones. Here's another one, investigation of the effect of microwave radiation. Okay, so cell phone microwave transmission, it can actually in high amounts cause apoptosis. It can damage the mitochondrial membrane gradient. It's all bad. Okay, and then here's sort of, I think this is the last slide, just showing you again that beta amyloid, when you have blood-brain barrier increased permeability and you have high-fat diets, so you've got insulin resistance, so you've tied up insulin-degrading enzyme, IDE, it gets used up clearing out the insulin from the hyperinsulinemia, and it's made in fixed quantities. It has higher affinity for insulin than it does for beta amyloid. Then the beta amyloid protein will go back across the blood-brain barrier and it'll go into the brain, and it'll then activate the microglia like I had just showed you earlier, the oligomers, going down the pathway of increasing nuclear factor kappa B and then IL-1B, and then when it forms fibrils, those can be phagocytized by microglia and lead to phagolysosomes, and the lysosome can be damaged and burst, and then you can get pop holes in the membrane of the microglia. You're going to kill the microglia, but then it's going to release a ton of IL-1B, which is tremendously inflammatory. So the bottom line is all this elevated beta amyloid can lead to destruction of brain cells, so you don't want it. And so the obvious answer is, well, what could you do to minimize that? And it's obvious. We just went through it. Minimize dietary fat. There's your answer. This is just one of the many reasons why diabetic patients tend to be cognitively impaired. And this is one of the things you can do to prevent that. So, hope you found that helpful.